All right, Austin. So I'm really stoked to bring you on because, like I mentioned when we were kind of BSing before, you're somebody that I've paid attention to for a long time. And I really do. It's been cool to watch the transformation. I think you've always been killing it with like contest prep. And now I see you killing it with functional. And I see you killing it with the mentoring. So, like, I've got to give you the credit first.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And like I said, we've shared clients. We continue to do so. So I love seeing that. But you mentioned that you have kind of always been a coach, right? So give me kind of the Cliff Notes version of how you started and built this business that other coaches aspire to have.
Yeah, so like I said, my beginning was a little bit different. There are some similarities and some parallels in the sense that I did do in-person personal training for a brief period of time. So like I think that's probably a parallel with some people. But essentially, right out of high school, I did have a part-time job at a local grocery store that was kind of supplementing my new personal training income because I was starting to do that. I originally had intended to go to college for some kind of health degree. I was looking into physical therapy, a couple different fields, similar fields there. So long story short, as I'm kind of going through and doing those prerequisites, the first 2 years or so, I became more interested in the coaching space because at the time the actual online aspect of it was very new. There was some people doing it, but I mean we're talking like single digit percentages of what it is now. So what I had found was through some of my experiences with a lot of my PT clients that there was a gap. There was a necessity that I needed to fill. And so I had an interest in that because I had already competed once. I competed as a teenager. I think I wasn't even 19. I think I was still 18 and I did my first contest prep myself at 18. I was literally had not so I was I was in wrestling. I got up to, high level in wrestling. I was actually kind of on the cusp of like, do I go to college for wrestling? But the colleges I wanted to go to didn't really offer the types of courses that I wanted alongside with the sport. So I opted out of that. But long story short, I'm like, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. Okay. Because I'd already been lifting and eating. I was the weird guy in high school that had a Tupperware containers and I literally weighed my food and brought it into the lunch table. Okay. So I did my first show, prep myself, and then people were, some younger people, mostly younger people initially were like, wow, that's really cool, right? So some of the people at the gym that I was training knew that I did that. Of course, that kind of strums up interest. That kind of started to just take off. I mean, it's not like I went to 20 clients or 50 clients or anything like that, but some I was getting some extra income. Like, okay, so this is something, right? So I switched my major. I ended up being a nutrition major. I did a lot, pretty much any elective and extra course I could do in psychology. I did it. Everything that I could possibly do on the psych side, I did all of it. So anything that they offered, I took it. And that obviously translated over into the coaching. Kind of fast forward a couple more years, and I completely dumped the in-person personal training by about year two of coaching. So this probably would have been 2000, I don't know, 2011 ish, 2011, 2012. I was completely 100% online, barely could pay my bills, but that's where, I'm like, I'm going to do this. What do I have to lose at this point? So I had not finished school yet. I was still taking my full-time courses. I was working, doing my coaching business, so on and so forth, kind of just going by feel because there was no business coaches and there was no mentors and there was no nothing. And I was just trying stuff. And that continued to grow and grow and grow. By about year five, probably about year six, that's when the mentorship interest came out. So like the way people found me was completely organic in the sense that I literally posted content every single day without fail, no matter what. It could have been
I'll get
just
to
a
that at some
personal,
point, but I love to hear that. I'm gonna
right,
circle back to that at some point because that is a
right.
huge key.
Sure. I mean, and it could have just been a simple update on myself, right? It could have been an update on my personal bodybuilding. I will say that I think a lot of the interest came too because with some of the stuff that people are really ingrained in now, advanced testing like GI maps and Dutch tests and all this stuff that people are doing. I was one of the first people that started talking about this stuff, and I got some backlash on some of this stuff.
I'm sure.
So, not so much people coming after me, but just kind of dismissive backlash, right? But I didn't quite know exactly what I was going to do with this, but I knew it was something because what I was seeing was, okay, well, I know how to get people in shape and how to lose weight and build muscle and stuff, but why is it not working for some people? Right? What is this about? Why are we having these symptoms, so on and so forth? And I had some medical background also from school and and I'm like, okay, well, these symptoms are these are medical symptoms. Like what do we have going on here? Right. So I started to explore that. And I'm very fortunate because I work with a doctor here in Ohio, Dr. Eric Serrano, who's very bright. He's really, really well known in the bodybuilding space. Most people would know him. Um, so he actually introduced me to things like Dutch testing. I took my very first one in 2015, I believe it was. And it was like, the medical reps are like soliciting at the office and they bring their little pamphlets in, right? And he's like, I have this new test. You're exhibiting some symptoms that I think with fatigue and some different stuff that I was dealing with. I want you to take it. So I took it. And ever since I'm like, okay, these are tools. Like these are things that I want to use because I'd already done preps and I dealt with like low testosterone and, all this other stuff already that he had kind of helped me through. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to start talking about this stuff. So I started talking about it and I dug into more metabolic adaptation and GI health and hormonal adaptations and progesterone and estrogen and like all this stuff. So by about 2017 or 2016 or 17, I had someone approach me and they said, "Hey, I want to know what you know and I'll pay you." Okay. Sure. I mean, I don't have any formal coursework or anything, but I would be happy to have calls with you and talk through stuff to the best of my ability. So I started accumulating some coursework, just some segments, some different stuff that I'd come up with, case study samples, stuff like that. And so that was probably what 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. And then people heard about it. And then eventually by probably about 2018, I just announced on social media, like, hey, this is a formal offering that I'm now going to offer as a service. I was literally charging the same thing I did for coaching at the time for the mentorship. I wasn't charging $800 a month or $1,000 a month or anything like that because I just didn't feel like I just didn't feel that that was worth it at the time. And of course, I wanted to build that roster. So now my roster is about, I would say it's probably like 60 to 70% clients and about 30 to 40% mentorship by volume of people. Granted, the mentorship can take more work. So my actual time is probably allocated about half and half, roughly. So I'll mentor anywhere from 20 to 25 people pretty much consistently. And these are one-on-one. I do some group stuff now that is a little more entry level, but my more advanced intensive stuff that's one-on-one, I carry that course load pretty much like all the time right now.
Cool.
So it was a very interesting evolution how we got there.
I mean, I feel like that's how so many, at least that's how it should be, right? Like, I come in contact with so many fitness coaches who have a hard time selling their offer and then just think they want to be a business coach, right? Like that's the worst idea I've ever heard, and people always ask me like, are you still coaching clients? Yeah, my roster for fitness is small and pretty much all of my clients have been with me for years and they all
Sure.
are struggling with hormonal irregularities and things. So like my coaching has evolved too. I don't claim to be functional by any means, but it started for me too. Like I had this, I guess my roster was around 75 clients for fitness coaching. And I scaled really quickly. And like you, I built an Instagram. I had an Instagram in 2012 and I was documenting my powerlifting and my bodybuilding and all that. And so when I finally said, hey, I'm going to take on clients, people came, right? And
Sure.
like you, it wasn't 0 to 50 overnight by any means. I just talked to a lot of random people on the internet and they wanted to pay me and jump on board. And, after a while, I had some coaches reach out and just say, hey, do you mentor? And I was like, no, but I guess I can. And like you said,
Sure.
I wasn't charging a lot at all. And over time, that's when I started to build curriculum. And that's how I kind of built the course I have now. But yeah, I love to hear that evolution because, I've I think it's so interesting. There's a lot of saturation in the space, of course, with coaching in general, but with business mentoring and even
Right.
functional mentoring now, right? Like it's
Sure.
becoming really freaking saturated, and it's hard to know who to hire and who to trust. And you're not out here proving like why you should hire me, which is what I like about your shit, because it's like it's face value. Like you see it, you know what you're talking about, and that's what I really enjoy about your content. It's no frills. It's no fancy, text and branding. Like it just is what it is. And that's what I like about it. It's just constant results and transformations and education. Um, and the split was helpful to know. So now, okay, going back to when you were first building your roster, right? Not the mentoring or any of that. I
Sure.
work with, I would say, a split between coaches that are just starting out, trying to fill their roster and go full time with this. And then I've got the clients that are going for that, 7-figure, multi-6-figure type mark, right? Starting with the coaches that are just starting out. I'm noticing so many people are getting so sidetracked by this functional stuff.
Okay.
Like, I don't think that everybody needs to be a functional coach. I just want to know your take on that. Honestly, I don't even have a question. I'm just like,
Okay.
what's your take on what's happening right now online? Everyone is like, I'm a gut health coach. I help with SIBO. It's like, do you know? I see the eye roll. And if you're listening versus watching, there was an eye roll. So give me some feedback there.
So just like anything else, there's a dollar sign, right? So there's like, I'm going to do this because it's hot and I should do it and everyone else is doing it. So that's always a factor with anything, right? I mean, that's social media to the T. Like when you see anything that's trending or hot or whatever, like there's some kind of value to that. Now, the other thing is that people come this a lot of people really haven't been in the space that long. So they're coming in and they're seeing people doing it. That's all that they have seen. They don't really have a perception of anything else. I have a different perspective in the sense that I'm maybe not old, but I started with the old heads, as we would call them, the bodybuilders on the forums that were like, that's what we did. It was a lot of trial and error and a lot of like intuitive coaching, right? So I also have that perspective, but something that people maybe are missing is that maybe they niche down too early in their career. They're trying to niche down, and there's a lot of issues with that. One, you're really closing off your potential demographics, like money, right? Clients that you can get, right? Also, there's ebbs and flows. Like there's different thing people are going to want different things that even not only from year to year, but different times of the year, right? There's going to be different ebbs and flows to the inquiries you're getting. Secondly, is your skill set is going to be small. So, for example, I work with a lot of mentorship clients that have only done functional health coaching. So when they fix their client's like, well, I want to lose body fat now. And they're like, well, I don't really know how to do that. So what happens? They're like, gone. Right. So your skill set's too narrow. So I think that in order to be the best, most knowledgeable, well-rounded coach you can be, you should have as much experience in as many areas as you can. So one of the things I encourage new clients within their comfort zone, of course, or new coaches within their comfort zone is don't hesitate to work with different types of situations and learn different skill sets, because also another thing that happens with niching down is they often niche down in the area that they came from. So for example, they had a GI issue or they had a hormonal issue, so they're like, I really want to help people with this. But then when they start helping them, they're like, I don't really like doing this that much, or they're like, I'm a bodybuilder, so I'm going to help bodybuilders. And they realize I don't really like coaching bodybuilders, you know? So the niching, like I have not personally niched down, and you absolutely can, and you can build a great business with it. But, I work with Today I posted a guy that has lost 100 pounds. Yesterday I posted a gut case. The day before I posted an autoimmune case today. Like I'm all over the place. So
But to me, well, and again, I let me give you, I guess, another perspective, because I don't want anyone to listen to this and think Austin said fuck niching. So like I'm not going to niche, because I
I don't
think
necessarily mean that, but
right. Like there's a great, well, I know, but you're listening to people that are sponges, or people are listening to you that are sponges. And they're like, oh, Austin said don't niche, fuck it. And I think that, to your point, when you originally said something, I want to hit on it because I agree so much. I get these new coaches who have never had a client in their life, and they're like, my niche is going to be gut health. And I'm like, you've had not a singular client. And maybe you have a different thought process here, but I would say get familiar with just coaching a client, building accountability, getting them adherent with the plan. It's almost like social media, this like functional space now, has made everyone feel like they're sick, right? Like everyone has a problem, everyone is fucked up. And it's like, listen, I'm not saying labs are perfect or everyone's going to have perfect hormone health, but they may not be losing weight because they're actually not tracking their food. It may not be because of whatever lab marker, right? So I would always say, start by just getting people on your roster. The first 10 clients you have are likely going to be people that know you, family, friends, people that went to high school, college with you, whatever, right? Don't charge them much, get them on your roster and get practice.
yep.
And to your point too, you also mentioned like, oh, Susie had a gut problem, so she's coaching gut health now. I do think you can coach through what you've been through, but not the immediacy of it, right? Like
Sure.
that's what I hate, is like, oh, you did your first contest prep and now you're a
Right.
bodybuilding coach. Sick. Like
Right.
fucking sick.
Right.
Yeah, like, and when I think of a niche, you know, I think that for you, it's almost like gen pop, but you have facets of that. Like I think a niche can have different containers. Like for example, I just work with online health and fitness coaches, but I'm not working with like people that want to build a VA business or anything like that. So it's like my niche is pretty broad. If you want to scale a business, cool, let's talk. But to your point, if you're going to really focus on that functional, make sure it's for the right reasons and not because you're chasing a dollar sign or you're chasing what's trendy. Because anytime I've ever chased a trend, I'm behind, and we start to see these people that are investing in the mentorships with you or whoever, and they've like never coached a client. And what happens? They don't start coaching, they jump to another mentor or another certification or another course. And I'm like, how much information are you going to ingest before you use it?
Right. Yeah. And you know, to that point of like diversity and stuff, I give you an example. I love examples, by the way. So that's a way that I try to illustrate things. It's like my last three contest prep people that I had worked with. One was last weekend, and there was literally like the last 3 weeks in a row or relatively close to that. They were all IFBB Pro competitors. So I mean, I'm like ultra diverse. So now, does everyone have to be like that? No, because of course, this took me we're talking like 15 years
Right. You're very diverse and you are
of
you.
time.
That's not normal. Yeah. 1,000%.
But with that being said, one of the things that I really hone in on when I'm teaching is, of course, we learn about hormones, we learn about labs, we learn about all the nuance, we learn protocols, we learn all of this stuff. But the one thing that I'm really driving home is, how do you actually coach an individual? How do you coach that human element? How do you, because for example, I always say that I could have a junior high student memorize a SIBO protocol. If I showed it to him enough, he would memorize it, and he would be able to look at a GI map and probably copy and paste it over and do it. But unfortunately, we don't live in a bubble. So when Susie has SIBO and she also has all this other stuff going on in her life, do you really know how to coach an individual? Do you really know how to apply these things and understand how to navigate the obstacles and make these things applicable to people and navigate life and people having kids and businesses and like all this stuff? And so that's one of the things that I'm really, really hone in on in the mentorship. Is it is a mentorship. When I think of the word mentorship, a class is not a mentorship. So me getting on a Zoom call and like going through a PowerPoint, and teaching my class is not a mentorship. That is an educational, it's an education service, right? We do that, but a mentorship, a mentor is somebody that has done these things and can actually guide you from a high professional level. That's what I envision as a mentorship. So I don't use that word loosely, you know. Um, but yeah, so people, they don't have social proof, they don't have experience. So there's, you just have to get out and do it within your comfort zone. I don't want people going out taking on a bunch of cases that they have no business touching. But again, I can't even tell you. I mean, the amount of people that I coach for cheap or probably free or, all these things for so long. And I'm like, they're jumping in and they hire the mentor and they're like $500 a month. I'm like, for what?
Oh, listen,
For
listen.
what?
And
What are
and
you what are you charging for?
there's so many mentors out there too, where, I always joke that I'm sometimes the rehab coach. Like they've already hired
Sure.
other mentors and they're like, all right, I've already invested all this money and now I'm talking to Taeler. We'll see what happens. Right. And similar to you, it's not just PowerPoints and crap. Like, yes, I have a course that is similar to that, but in terms of like my mastermind, absolutely not. Like there is that one-to-one connection and all of that and individualization in everyone's businesses. But it's just so interesting because I'll get a client, like a beginner client, and they've had maybe, I don't know, 10 clients ever, and everyone's dropping off, bailing on payments, bailing on contracts. And I'm like, what are you charging? They're like 850. I'm like, you've had 10 clients your entire life. What the fuck?
Good luck.
Like, you know, I don't get me wrong. Like, I think that there's a threshold, right? Like, don't charge $50 a month, but
Sure.
my first like 10 clients paid me $150 a month and I got them kick-ass results and they ended up paying me my full price when I raised it, and I think, I don't think free is helpful just because I think people don't really follow through. And I know you want to get the testimonials and all that, but like if your best friend's not paying you, she's probably not following protocol. But
Sure.
um, yeah, to your point, like I don't know who put this out there. This will charge your worth. Like, first of all, like your worth has no dollar value. Like, your worth is, there's no limit, right? So I don't know. But yeah, I'm with you. It's like, I think that there's this message of just charge more, make more, charge more, make more. And it's like, cool, get ready for a high turnover, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Because you're getting, and it depends on really what kind of background you have in marketing and things. Like there are people that are really good at bringing in clients, but retain retention and acquisition are not the same, thing. Acquiring something and retaining something are not the same. You need both skills, right? You need both skills, but you can't have one without the other. And in fact, retention is a much more useful skill because retention leads to referral, and referral leads to inquiry, and so on and so forth. So yes, you do need to be able to make yourself stand out. You do need to know how to talk to people when they inquire with you. Um, whether that is whether that's like closing on a client, understanding how to talk to the person, or having something that is visually appealing or whatever it might be. There's a lot of ways to do that. But ultimately, like you said, I mean, I know people, I've worked with a couple teams that they were marketing backgrounds. They brought everybody in and they're like, our turnover's so bad, you know, and well, what's happening there too is that you're spending all of your time onboarding people and setting up new plans and never really building that relationship, and you're not getting the recurring income. And client retention length, like how long you've had a client, is an extremely important statistic. you know that is something that if you've only been coaching for a year, of course, you're not really going to have that. But if you've been coaching for more than 2 years, I would say that if you're seeing high turnover still, then we have a problem, right?
I mean, I think if you can't keep a client, like if you're struggling to keep a client the length of your contract, we really have a problem. And, not that I want to necessarily go into kind of like what that has to look like, but, I see a lot of coaches that I work with where they're trying to just crank up their contract length to a year or whatever, just to like lock somebody in. And then realistically, if they bail on the payment, like, how are you going to enforce that? You don't have an attorney.
What do you like?
What do
What
you
are you
do?
going to do?
What are you gonna do?
Right.
Like, you have to have like a pretty substantial business to really back your contracts, right? And that's
Yeah.
why I think a lot of coaches don't really have contracts. You know, and I, for my fitness clients, I always had like a 3 month, and then I just went month to month after that, because you can crush it in 90 days and convince them that like you're the real deal. And
Yep.
my retention average was always 22 months, like, you know, whereas like industry standard is like 9. And to your point, that comes with like, I think we forget to be a human, you know, like being a coach, like, yes, there is skill set, but if your client feels like you're talking to just another person or you're like a robot, you're gonna have a really hard time. So what you said was kind of like a great segue into talking about retention. But, you know, how do you keep your clients continuously checking in, engaged, especially during the boring periods, like the maintenance phases and the boring protocols, and where there's no weight loss or aesthetic goals? You know what I mean? Because everyone comes to you wanting to lose weight, or they want to fix their hormones to lose weight, or whatever, right? Get on stage again. So how do you keep them motivated?
Yeah, so there's a few main kind of key points that we can hit on there. One is, and this was kind of a joke I made on a call with someone the other day, but it's a very real thing in that when you are in that, maybe you are in that correction period where you are correcting some kind of functional health issue, and it's kind of like, hey, good job this week, let's talk next time type of thing. um, Part of your job is you almost have to keep the client entertained. So these, and when I say entertained, it's not like I'm giving a bunch of filler stuff to keep them occupied. It's that I can what I understand is how to divert their focus away from this monotony and towards things that are productive. So, for example, if the plan is a protocol that requires X amount of weeks, I am not going, like, the protocol's working. It's there. It's in the background. It's doing its thing. We're going to touch on it when we need to touch on it. But the other stuff that we're going to be talking about in the meantime is there's all of these other little areas within their life and, goals that we can pull from. So maybe it is exploring other interests. Maybe I'm encouraging them to diversify. Maybe I am looking at, if they're doing a SIBO protocol, maybe I'm talking about, let's really talk about your training, your mechanics. Let's hone in on some of these things. That way, when you're healthy, we're really dialed in and we can go after it. Let's talk about maybe your narrow-mindedness and your, these, like, do you have other hobbies? Are there things you're interested in? Are there things you can do? Right. We're ultimately, we're not therapists, but there's an element of human connection that we have to, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? Really kind of nurture,
Yeah.
right?
And facilitate. Like that's how you build a relationship.
Right.
1000%. We're for sure not therapists, but damn, sometimes it feels like it. I mean, when you're
Yeah.
somebody's coach, you're getting the brunt of everything. Um, especially if you're doing like business mentoring too, right? I feel like, you know, whether it's business mentoring or fitness coaching or whatever, like, you know, you're the one that they're giving you all the baggage to, right? They're sharing everything with you. Um, and you want to make sure that you're creating a relationship where they feel okay sharing those things with you, right? Because
Right.
you're going to be the coach during the divorce and the breakup and the weight gain and whatever else is going on, or the husband losing their job, or, you know, whatever else you're going to hear, right? And I always try to, you know, again, not to say that I'm trying to lock anyone in, but it's like you want to make sure that you stay the necessity, that you stay the highlight of somebody's day, that like you are constantly adding value to somebody's life. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we are a luxury service, right? Like not everybody has a health coach or a mentor. And so I think that's so important. And I find that people really struggle to create community and connect. And to me, the other than like being a good coach, right? Like I just find that retention is something that so many coaches struggle with. And you're going to get bad eggs. You're going to get people that kind of suck and don't pay you on time and whatever else. But
Sure.
generally speaking, if you are constantly chasing payments, it's not a good sign, right? Or
Right.
how do you ensure that people check in? That's another question I get a lot of the time, is
Okay.
like people don't check in.
Yeah. So, funny you say that, because yes, it was literally yesterday I had made a post about showing up and how people need to show up. And the whole thing was based around this idea of, if prioritization and showing up no matter what. Now, when I say that, the caveat is that I also have to show up, you know. So one thing that I do a lot of, and that I'm actually with my, I was having a good conversation with one of my coaches yesterday that works on my team, is that the upfront conversations and expectations and verbiage and things that you use when you intake someone is really important. So, for example, what a lot of coaches kind of fall into this trap is they're ultra motivated because someone's about to pay them, right? So they're like, new client, paycheck, you're in, and then they kind of like lose that motivation over time. The client gets bored, the client's not interested in working with them, they're not really getting the service that they thought they were going to get, so on and so forth. So I think it's very important to be very clear and concise about what we are about to do and what we're about to offer and what I'm like to work with up front. And so everyone's kind of on the same page. That's a very helpful thing. So, for example, when someone comes in and I have a check-in process, everyone's has their own check-in process and stuff. Maybe that first week, they check in and they do something, they don't do it correctly. Okay. So I'm going to point that out. I'm going to say, hey, make sure that we're getting these things in correctly and we're doing this, this, and this. You're checking in on time, so on and so forth. Or I'm seeing some bad habits. I'm seeing some things that I know in 3 months are going to be a real problem. I'm going to point these things out up front in a friendly way. And my way might be, I just want to kind of go over this. I want to make sure that, I want to make sure that this doesn't become an issue. I want to be able to help you to the best of my ability. So I will go over those things up front, because you better believe that if you ignore stuff, if you ignore have bad habits and you ignore those missing check-ins and that stuff, in 3 months from now, there's no going back. You're not going to be able to pull that client back in. It's too late. And that's going to be a really difficult conversation to have. So transparency up front, setting expectations, constantly showing up for your clients and maintaining that level that you gave them for that first month. You need to maintain that all the way through, no matter what, because guess what? The payment's the same. Just because the process might be a little monotonous or something, I'm going to show up every week, no matter what, and give that encouragement. And maybe it's just within that check-in, we're kind of doing the same thing week to week, but maybe I point out some other successes or things that they're improving, or, talk about my process. So, hey, this was a great week. Protocol's working great. We're not going to change anything. If this continues, we're probably going to end, probably going to move to this step and this step and this step. And I'm thinking out loud and I'm talking about what that might look like. People love that. They love it because timeframes, like using timeframes is super useful because people can digest timeframes, but you don't always have a time frame. So it's difficult to say, like, in 12 weeks we're going to do this, or in 4 weeks we're going to do this. If you can, that's awesome, people love it. But if you can't, you at least need to think. I always say thinking out loud. I at least need to think out loud and let them know what that's going to look like. Because one of the things I ask when I get new clients in is, have you ever had any negative past coaching experiences, and what were the issues that you experienced in those issues and
I
within
asked the
those.
same thing.
Right. So that has literally nothing to do with me wanting dirt on coaches, because I really don't care.
Nope.
Nothing. I'm really trying to accomplish two things. One thing is that I want to see, what did this person struggle with, that I want to make sure I'm not doing that. Right. Two is that I can learn about the clients there too, because sometimes if they're like, well, I had 5 coaches and they were all doing this and this, I'm thinking, maybe it was you. Maybe it was you. So I can learn a lot about that client and help right up front at the beginning of that process. I can address these things and make sure that my expectations and their expectations and our process is correct. So it's about consistency, it's about transparency, it's about um consistently showing up for the client, and also um encouraging them, but showing, it's really, showing that you care about them through that process. If I Again, if we are in some kind of monotonous phase, which is pretty much everything bodybuilding related, I mean, it's all monotonous at some point. You have small victories along the way, but it's all monotony ultimately. um, I have to do a really good job of continuously pointing things out and keeping them motivated, and so on and so forth. So I think people just kind of, I really think a lot of coaches just get the client in and they're excited and then they're just not excited anymore. And that's
Let me
it.
ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Do you see a correlation between coaches who struggle to motivate their clients also struggling to scale their businesses?
Sure. Yeah.
In
Because,
terms of like lack of self-motivation, accountability, and then they also are struggling. Like I find that, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
yeah, well, you normally project, right? You project what you feel and what you experience, you project always. So you, and something that people don't fully understand and don't fully kind of hone in on is these clients are not you. They're not you. I know what I can do. I know what I'm capable of consistency wise. I'm the guy that in the contest prep or the whatever phase that it's just I'm like, I'm gonna do it regardless. It
Yep.
is what it is, and we're gonna do it.
Yep.
But guess what? 90% of everyone else is not that. That's not them. And I understand that. So I'm not going to be telling them that they're weak or that they're whatever. I'm going to figure out like what makes this person tick and how do I, you know, how can I talk to them in a way that is going to keep them interested and motivated? And it's the same thing with any of the coaches that I work with. They tend to they tend to project onto their clients and they tend to struggle with things that their clients struggle with. Like there's a lot of parallel there, right?
I just think that's
So,
funny to bring up because, it's almost like there's not awareness though, right? I talk about
oh,
this.
there is not awareness.
Well, that's why it's
There's
funny
not
because I'm
awareness.
like, oh, wait a second. Clients aren't paying you. Your payment just failed to me. Funny how that works, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, that's just a random example, but again, oh, you're struggling with retention because your clients, you don't know how to coach them through mundane periods. Well, sorry, but building a business is pretty fucking mundane most of the time. Like, yeah, there's going to be, it's consistency. It's a game of consistency and how long can you keep being consistent? You know what I mean? So like you were going to say something, but
Well, I mean, there's numerous examples. You know, we mentioned content earlier, how I was posting every day and doing the stuff. It's you can't post a reel and if you get 3 likes on your reel, you're like, well, that sucks. I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay, but there's 900,000 other people posting reels too. And like, what makes you think that just because, even if your stuff is good, what makes you think that people are going to pay attention to you until they're consistently seeing you and you're consistently showing up, doing it over and over and over again? Um, any of the content, podcasts, I posted the other day, I do a podcast with a guy over in the UK. We have now been doing them consistently for 7 years. 7 years, 7 years. It's a long time. Okay.
a lot of data
Um,
there. Yes.
I have probably posted almost every day. Of course, there's exceptions there, but we'll say posted 4 to 5 days a week for 15 years. Guess what? Everyone's going to see it. There's no possible way that people aren't going to see me. It's not right. Like, now, do you have to do that? No, it's not necessary. It's not necessarily the only way to do things. That's one model. But when I'm consistently showing up and producing results and consistently showing up for my clients, you better believe that the referrals are going to come in, the retention is going to stay, people are going to be happy. Um, and also, also when people like scaling is an interesting thing too, because there's scaling too quickly could be problematic. Scaling too slowly could be problematic. Like if you're scaling too quickly, are you bringing in more than are you biting off more than you can chew?
I worry
Um,
more about scaling too slowly than scaling too quickly. And when I say slowly, because I don't want anyone listening thinking I'm like pushing fast cash. That's definitely not the vibe. But like, let's say year to date or something, a coach has 10 clients and they end the year with 20 clients. I'm a little worried that that's too slow of growth, right? Because I worry that if they never, they're just not, they're not putting in the work in the right spots And I think that coaches that are scaling too slowly are spending more time thinking about why they are not further along.
And
And
just
that's
doing
the
it.
issue. Right. Whereas if you're scaling too quickly, which I mean, I think, I don't know if you ever experienced bouts of this. I sure did, but it was
Sure.
easy to catch myself and be like, all right, I got to stop taking payments and like hire an extra person or fix this system or refine this. Like, because, you know, I always tell my clients, like, every time your business grows 20%, you know, at least once you get to a certain level, shit starts to break. Every 20% shit breaks. And it's not a bad thing. It's just like, you got to keep moving. Right. And I think that coaches assume that like, oh, I want to build a business like Austin or Taeler, whoever, right? I want to have this like 7-figure business or whatever the number is in your head that you think is like the top. And we have problems. They're just so different. Like they're just different problems, right? Like, no, I don't have a problem getting in my DMs every day or posting content or whatever the hell it is, right? But they just evolve and they grow. And I think that, you know, I asked people on my Instagram yesterday, and I'll ask you the same question. What do you think the number one trait is for an entrepreneur, like a successful entrepreneur to have?
Hmm.
If you had to limit it to one thing, like what would
One.
you say? I know it's hard.
Okay. The one thing is probably that they, and well, because we've been kind of beating consistency to death. That's a thing for sure. I mean, that's a factor.
Yeah.
But probably the one thing is that they aren't they aren't going to be discouraged to the point of not they're not going to be discouraged by momentary failures. Okay. And
Resiliency, maybe?
resiliency. And when I say that, and the reason I say that is because I kind of go back to like the post thing. I only got 3 likes. Understanding expectations and understanding what those are and how that looks, and really understanding what it takes to get to where you want to be is a really important, trait. So if you aren't resilient and you can't take the lumps and you can't keep pushing, then ultimately, I'm sorry, but if you think this is going to be like a linear, smooth process without any obstacles, I hate to break it to you, but
It's not.
it's not.
Right? I mean, there's like, and that's the thing. And like, I feel like I'm diving into this a little bit too early, but you know, there's just this idea that is on social media now that building a business is easy and that you can lay on the beach and make money. And this passive income word just like irks me to no end.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to lay on a beach all day, every day. Like, I'm going to get bored. I like working, right? But working 60 hours a week for myself is much different than working 60 hours a week for somebody else. And like, if you just want to get paid and you just want to make money, go get a W-2 job. Like, no one's forcing you to be an entrepreneur. And to be frank, not everyone needs to be. Like, not everybody is going to have a successful business. Like the statistics show that, right? Like, it is hard.
Sure.
And I think that, to your point, like, yes, resiliency is one of the top traits you have to have. And, you know, I'll work with a client, they'll have a broken sales funnel or whatever, and like, we'll make a few tweaks. And 7 days later, they're like, hey, there's no new sales yet. I'm like, cool, you got 7 days of data. I need 90. You know what I mean? Like, it just takes time. And I think that there's just such a lack of patience. And again, like, going back to this, whatever you're struggling with in your business, chances are like, that's reflective of what your clients are struggling with, right? And you know, like you mentioned at the beginning, you're very different. You're like, I know I'm different. 90% of people aren't like me, and I'm the same way as you. Like, if my coach says jump, I say how high, no questions asked. I'm fucking doing it. End of story. I will get everything done on time. You know, something that I don't see with a lot of coaches, and you know, I'm very much a type A person. I don't know if that's how you are, but you
Would say
know,
so.
assuming probably if we're where we're at, you know, talking about
Sure.
this. But, you know, whenever I'm thinking of just like planning out my business and getting shit done, so many coaches struggle with getting the things done. Like, they don't know how to set deadlines and execute. They've got these grand ideas and they want to hire this person and build this out and start coaching that and add this over here. And it's like, they don't know how to map shit out and create a game plan. Do you ever find that that's an issue with people that you work with?
Yeah, well, thoughts and execution and actions are not the same thing. So, you know, um, and game plan is kind of multifactorial. One is the plan. Secondly is just doing it. You people are waiting for the right time, or they're waiting for the opening, in which there are better times to do certain things. Like you said, scaling at a certain rate, you're like, hey, I need to stop for a second. I need to reevaluate this. I need to fix this, add this, take this away. But at the same time, there's a parallel there with like um, hiring a coach. What's a common thing that someone will say? Well, I'm going to start with you next month because of this. Okay. Now, what happens next month when you have this now? Okay. Or the month after that? It's like,
That
so what?
when
There's
people
always stuff.
say I'm waiting to go all in,
There's always
that's
stuff.
like my least favorite thing, because I'm giving you the business perspective just because I don't really have a ton of fitness clients anymore, but I hear this all the time. I'm going to start in January or whatever. I'm going to go when I can go all in. And my thought is like, okay, cool. So like husband's getting deployed, baby's coming. I don't know, whatever you want to say, right? I'm not here to help you create a business that is like built on circumstances, right? Like I'm here to help you build a business that is going to withstand all that bullshit you're going through
All
right now.
circumstances.
So you
Yep.
going all in means right now, because in 90 days, something else is going to pop up.
Yep. Always. And again, that's not to say that there's never considerations with
Totally.
what's going on in
Totally.
life. Totally within reason, of course. But at the same time, I mean, we can make excuses till the bitter end, you
I
know?
just don't know. And you can tell me this, but like, I truly have never had a slow season in business in terms of life. Like something is always happening, whether it is like a death in the family, or whether it is my car broke down, or I'm just making shit up at this point, but like a cross country move. I don't know what it is, right? But like there's always something going on, whether it's a business fire, a life fire. Like I've just never had like, wow, absolutely everything is just totally freaking smooth for a 90-day period. Like it may not
Right.
be a catastrophe, but my point is like I always strive to help my clients build, machines of businesses. Like when you take a vacation, I want you to still be able to make money, right? Like I'm helping you build the sales team and all that fun stuff, because if you're having to babysit every single day, then it is going to be really hard to take time off. Like I want your business to support whatever you want, right? But I find that so many coaches are just like, they're not sticking it out long enough. Like that really is what it is. Like if you just held on for 90 more days, 120 more days, like it may take you a year. But if I could guarantee that you would have a full roster in 1 year if you never gave up, like would you do it? Yes or no?
Sure.
Right? Like if you
Absolutely.
committed if you committed every single day to do the things, the posting, the DMing, the whatever, like if you could hang on for 1 year without any instant gratification, but in 1 year from now, I would give you a six-figure business. Could you hang on? Like, could you do it? And most people are
Sure.
like, oh yeah. And it's like, well, that's what
Yeah.
it takes.
Yeah. And I do this a lot with clients. So we talked about, keeping people motivated, right? One of the things that I like to do is I'm really big on using foresight, right? I like to in you mentioned the word awareness too. That's super important. Building awareness within clients so they can report to me better. They can become more aware of what they're actually feeling and the feedback they're giving me. Same with the coaches. But if I have somebody which human nature is instant gratification. It's like, now we want this right now. And if I were to say to somebody, okay, you want to lose, arbitrary example, but you want to lose 15 pounds. Cool. We need to do XYZ to do this properly and make sure that you maintain these results. And they's like, well, I want to lose 15 pounds by whatever. So what if I told you that we could lose 15 pounds by this date, or we could lose 15 pounds by this date and you would maintain that result indefinitely? Which of those two scenarios sounds more enticing to you? And it's difficult because, again, short-sightedness, or lack of foresight, lack of awareness is is an issue. But if I can get people to understand that big picture and get them to understand why they're being consistent and what they're actually pushing towards, you use business as an example. Um, man, yeah, I want the six-figure business or the multi six-figure business or the 50 clients or the 75 clients or whatever it is. But you can't see past tomorrow. We have to get you to see past tomorrow first. But there's, there's layers to that. Of course, like I try to understand the perspective, because if I have a client that's 21 years old and they say I want to compete in bodybuilding and they're really gung ho and they've done a show and they want to be like, I want to be a pro and this and that. They've only been bodybuilding for 2 years and they're only 21 years old. That's like, 20% of their life experience. They don't really have anything else. So, but what if I told you by 25, we could accomplish all of these things if we did this correctly? It's a tough sell sometimes, but when you can really get someone to understand that, buy in to that process, the rewards. I use this example. So it's like if you had a graph, and I drew this graph out one time and I posted it up as an illustration. It's like you have two lines on a graph. One goes like this, and the kind of graph cuts off up here. One kind of goes like this. Now, on this top line, what you don't see is after the end of it, they fall and crash and burn to this pit of death and their demise. But on this one keeps going. This line never stops, right? But if they didn't see the cliff on the end of the first graph, they're picking that first graph every time, because it's quicker, it's faster, it's better, it's more appealing, it's sexier, it's whatever. So, you know, there's we have to, as coaches, we have to use our experience and our foresight to help them understand what this looks like. Um, and that's important. But if you're a mentor, if you're mentoring people and you've only coached for 2 years, what kind of foresight do you really have? you know?
There's just absolutely nothing in my brain that has been sexy or glamorous about building my business. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but nothing has been glamorous about the process, right? And I've just noticed lately too this trend with like outsource as fast as you can. I hate it. I hate it because people are outsourcing these like sales team members, and I'm like, you can't even sell your offer. Like, why are you putting the only way you make money into somebody else's hands? Like,
You don't understand it yourself. You don't understand, you know, and there's a lot of parallels there. It's sales or hiring coaches or all these things. I'm like, until you can do each part of this yourself and you are completely saturated to the point of being really uncomfortable, then what do we like? I outsource all kinds of stuff. I outsource,
of course.
editing and
But I'm talking like
tasks and
year one,
assistants and all this stuff.
first 6 months, you know?
Yeah, what are you doing? You don't even understand how it's like calling customer service with a business. It's like you know, the shipping department never talks to the customer service department. So there's like a huge disconnect there and you can never accomplish anything. We've all experienced that. So as a business owner, if you are outsourcing stuff and you don't actually understand what it is that process looks like or what you're outsourcing, then there's going to be huge disconnects. Stuff's going to start falling apart. And maybe you won't even get things done the way you want to get them done. Like, how can you outsource something that you don't have any understanding of? Like, what am I going to tell them?
Especially at the level that I'm assuming you're talking about, right? Like it's one thing if you're running high multi 7 or 6 or 7 figure business and you're like, all right, I'm going to outsource, like I want someone to manage my ads, whatever, fine, right? But I'm talking
Sure.
about like, that first year of your business where you're like, oh my God, because in my opinion, aside from coaching your clients, it feels like content sometimes takes so long. All of my clients are like, God, I feel like content creation is a full-time job. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. But also, what else are you going to do? Like, that's literally your only
What do
job,
you, right?
to market and
This,
sell.
this is
Oh
all
my
you're doing
God.
right now.
I spend so much time in my DMs. Good. Like, spend more and make money, right? Like, I love referrals. Like, don't get me wrong. We all love referrals, but most people don't have a history on social media, or they're building a platform from scratch. And like, you're gonna have to do two things. One, I made sure that when I started my business, I told 10 people about my business every single day. I would just bring it up in conversation. I would talk to people about it. I didn't give a shit. But then also, like, you're going to have to bring people to your Instagram. So, like you mentioned, I posted every single day. That's awesome. And the algorithm 10 years ago and 5 years ago is really fucking different. But right now, posting every day doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to find you. And so, it's this idea of like, okay, let me switch like roles for a second. Like, let's say you open up a gym and tell nobody that it opens. Do you expect people to find the
Sure.
doors? Fucking no, you don't. So it's like,
Right.
it's just interesting to me that those are the biggest complaints, right? With coaches that are not scaling to that first six figure, they are avoiding the work and trying to find the easy way out and spending way more time trying to find it than just doing the work, right? Like, I think that we get so caught up on like, I'm not aligned with it. Like, I feel so salesy. I'm like, okay, well, you got to sell your service. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Yeah. And again, like you said, referrals ultimately referrals will become more and more of your over time will become more of your inquiries. They should. If you're doing something correctly, like you should be getting a fair amount of referral based business. But you're not going to get any referrals if you don't have any proof. And you're not going to have any proof if you don't do any work. And like where are we going here? You know,
What advice would you give? Okay, so like thinking about the coach who's like, all right, I want to fill my roster, I want to quit my full-time job. Like, what's the best advice you can give for a coach who's looking to get their first 25 clients?
I can tell you this. So I have a great example. So the guy that I actually just hired onto my team as another coach, maybe a couple months ago, someone that I've known for a long time. He'd mentored with me, education, all this stuff. He was working at he was working at Rogue Fitness. I'm sure he doesn't care. I go out here. He's working at Rogue Fitness. He was doing some coaching part time, this and that, and he'd like kind of talked about the idea, and we went back and forth about it, but there was never like a serious conversation about it. Then we had a conversation, and he said, "I'm going to do this full time." I'm like, "Okay, you have the knowledge. I know you have the knowledge. We've done the knowledge is there. We've done the education. We'll continue to do the education. What do we need to do to get you there?" And I looked at what he was doing, and it was just, for one, he didn't have the time, right? Because he was allocating a lot of time towards that job. But secondly, the the consistency wasn't there. The social media wasn't there. The consistency with the clients wasn't there. The consistency in his conversation with the clients wasn't there in terms of intaking people and also being authoritative and getting those payments and a lot of drop offs and all this stuff. I'm like, this is it, man. Like, these are the things. I mean, it's not super sexy, but like, these are the things that you're going to have to do. And so what happened was, I was like, you have the skills. So I'm confident that when you do go all in, that you will accumulate clients quickly and get that referral business also because you're good at it. So he did the right stuff at the beginning. He learned how to coach. So long story short, came in, probably had, I don't know, less than 10 clients, like 6 or 8 clients, and kind of was like on and off type of thing. Within within the first like 4 to 6 months, he had 35 clients. Like, awesome, right? We added 30 clients in 4 months. And that was with very little, um, business experience on his own. Of course, now he's getting better. He's getting better at those things. We're working on them. But the underlying factor there was, he's like, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to be consistent, and I'm going to make sure people see me. I'm going to make sure that I'm having the right conversations. And sure enough, boom, boom, boom. But with that being said, my advice also is that you have to have the skills. Okay. So you can't really have one without the other. So for example, if you are someone that wants to hire a mentor or mentors, maybe you want to hire multiple mentors, you should be objective with yourself and understand what you are lacking. So if you have a marketing background already and you worked in sales, can you get better at it within the coaching space? Probably. Like, maybe don't understand your demographic fully, but maybe that's not the first thing that you need to look at. maybe education and client communications and, coaching skills is what you need first. If you have the coaching skills, but you have no idea how to talk to people and, close, hire you. Okay. Like, be objective with the things that you need. You can't just jump around to all these mentors and all these people without understanding what your needs are and what you're lacking. And then the second piece is, now do the work. Now
Yeah.
put in the work.
I mean, I really do. I really think that so many coaches spend more time trying to figure out what is wrong when they actually, like, the answer is right in front of them. Like, I really don't think that like, if you're a coach and you're listening to this and your business hasn't grown, you're not getting more sales calls or applications filled out or whatever, it's really rare that you truly don't know the problem, right? Like, somebody might say, well, I'm DMing 10 people a day. I'm like, well, response rate's like 10%, bro. So like, you might get one person who responds to you a day. Like, we need more volume. Or I'm posting consistently 3 times a week. I'm like, but you're never on your stories, or you're never talking to people. Like, the answer is always obvious, right? And then we start to get the shiny object syndrome of like, you know what, this isn't really working, but like, I need to build an email list. I'm like, can we not build an email list when you can't even like figure Instagram out? You know what I mean? Like, we just always think something else is better. And to your point, it's like keeping these clients motivated. That's the interesting part sometimes with like the business coaching thing, because a lot of it is just do the same thing over and over and over again, right? And figuring out, in my experience, like, why the fuck do you want this? Like, figuring out their vision. It may not be a 5-year plan, but like, what does your life look like in a year if you do all the things and you are super consistent and you don't give up? Like, how does your life change? Like, is that what you want? Right? Like, what's the impact that you're desiring? Because so many people are like, I have nice biceps, I could be a coach. And it's like, well, if that's like your reason for starting, then you're really never going to scale a business. Like, it'll only get so far and it'll crash and burn. I've definitely worked with clients, not very many, like less than 5 ever in my lifetime of doing this, that really were like, honestly, I just want to make money. And it was something that didn't really come out until working with them. And every single time I thought, this is not gonna, I mean, okay, like, all right. And none of them grew.
Sure.
Like, the motivation wasn't there. And I truly do believe that, like, I've always loved teaching and love mentoring, and stepping into the business mentoring space was, I never thought was part of the plan. But I wish coaches would understand that problem solving is so much more important than you understand. Like, when we're coaches for our fitness clients and all of that, every single day we're solving problems. We have to get curious. We have to find the answers. And then we go to our business and we don't use the same principles. It's like,
Right.
you're just like, oh, it's broken. Can't fix it. And I want to make sure, like you mentioned your resiliency earlier. And I think curiosity is what I would say, right? Just really getting curious about how everything works. To me, that is the trait that I would say every entrepreneur needs to have.
Yeah.
For these coaches that are scaling, maybe they're stuck. They've got a full roster. They've got a small team. I don't know if it's ACs or not, whatever, but what are the biggest challenges you see from coaches trying to double, triple their income, hit a 7-figure year? What are some sticking points you see or problems?
Well, one thing is they lose touch with their why and where they're actually, like, what are they trying to accomplish and why? Um, because ultimately scaling is, dollars and money, and there's like, but they really lose touch with their initial motivations, and sometimes needing to revisit that and understanding that, how did you get there, right? Because how you got there and what you might need to do moving forward may not necessarily be the same, but there's clues there, right? You didn't get there by mistake. So there's a lot of principles that you might have gotten away from that you need to revisit. Um, and also understanding, what kind of, and when you're getting to a certain point, understanding what you want your role to be. Also, that's important. Do you want to be someone that takes on exclusively an admin role within your team? Do you want to continue to coach clients? Do you want to expand out your revenue streams to, like me, I do mentorship and classes and group mentorships and coaching and like all this stuff. And what I've really created is they all feed into each other, right? Because people get interested from each space. And so there's like a constant endless loop of inquiry system, right? One thing that personally for me that I don't really have a whole lot of interest in is I really just I really just don't have a whole lot of interest in just being an admin and never coaching people. And that's fine. And some people do, and that's okay. But the problem is you can't lose touch with your business. I've worked with people that have taken on that admin role, and they've lost touch because they're not doing it anymore. They're not doing it anymore. So they don't really have touch with what their coaches are doing and what their clients need and stuff. Because again, it's like I said, the shipping and the customer service department example that I use.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. So if you look at a CEO of a really good business, I think something that you'd probably find is that they do understand the needs of the customers. They do understand, what needs to be done, and what their business stands for, and how they can move forward. A bad example might be one that is does lose touch, and they're just, like I said, allocating everything, and they're not really knowing what's going on, and they're just in the background chirping at people. You know, I think there's an element of staying in the trenches a little bit there that probably is very beneficial.
I was talking to my mentor about this recently, actually, because like I mentioned earlier, every time the business grows 20%, I'm like, damn, it's like I get sucked back into the day to day. And I'm like, wait, got to get out again. Right. Not everything. I coach all my clients every single day, but he made this reference where it's like, hey, even though my business is here, like I'm in the cloud sometimes, I'm in the dirt sometimes. Like that's never going to go away. And I thought that was like that's the most basic analogy, but it's so true. I think that these coaches that are making that, like, once you get to like 250,000, it's almost like something happens to you where you're like, oh, all right, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to DM anyone.
Right.
I'm fucking
Yeah.
killing it. Everything's great. And
I
then you know
use
what happens? Yeah, like you know what I mean? And so what's funny to me is the trick to scaling a business, if there even is a secret, if there even is a trick, it's you have to make sure that all of this over here that's going really well stays at the same level. If not, the volume needs to increase simultaneously while you're building over here, right? So if you're crushing it and you're getting calls booked, whatever volume you're putting in for that, let's bring up the lever a little bit. And then let's bring in the new hire or the new whatever, right? Like it's almost like these business owners struggle to balance everything. And I noticed that their efficiency plummets, or they brought in the new team, they brought in the ACs, and like, where'd my sales go? Well, did you stop DMing? Well, it was going so well, but you stopped, right? Like that's what I notice.
you can't, if you took a designer brand that produced whatever, like a brand that was built on quality, and they scaled to a certain point, and then the quality went away, what's going to happen?
Well, same thing. I
Right.
don't know if you ever see this, but it's not often, but it's like on one hand, you have the client or the coach who's like, I want to coach forever. I love it. And on the other hand, you're like, I never want to coach again. I just want to build a team of a ton of assistant coaches. Right. And I'm not going to tell you there's one or the other, but I am going to tell you that I do see more success with A versus B.
Or
Because,
some middle ground of
correct,
like, right.
correct. Because I understand being like, I want to have like, ultimately 10 high ticket clients that I love. I get that. Right. But if you're making, if you hit like 50 clients and you're like, oh my God, I never want to coach again in my life, it's going to be really hard to bring in team members that see how obsessed you are with your results. I think the key, you mentioned multiple departments not communicating. And I love that analogy because I see businesses fail when there isn't a community and a culture built around the vision. And you mentioned vision. And it's like, if you're trying to build a 7-figure business and your team isn't totally on board with your mission, your brand, your vision, where you're going, that's the only way to keep them on board, because ultimately they are getting a paycheck from you. No one is
Right.
as invested in your business as you are, right?
Right.
So forget your clients for a second, because at some point your team has to come before your clients. And I know that sounds like awful. And oh my God, did she just say that? But like, if you get to a certain level, your clients are not going to get served to the best capacity if your team members are fucking up their job, right? And the only way they're going to perform optimally is if you are giving them an environment where they can, like my sales team, for example, they are so bought in on the vision, and it's awesome because they're like, I see the results. I see what happens, right? Like if I was selling some scam product, they probably couldn't sell it very well. You know what I mean? So I
Sure.
just think it's really important that as you're scaling your business, like you remember to keep at least one hand in the dirt. Don't forget that, right? Like don't outsource everything so fast, and make sure that you're able to just get really freaking clear on what you want. I really do see the struggle there, right? I think it's hard in the first 6 months to a year because most people are like, I just want to match my salary. I just want to quit my job. And like, that's
Sure.
okay to think that. But once,
Sure.
once you know, you're like, I got something here. If money is the motivating factor, it's not going to get you anywhere, because at the end of the day, like if everything else is awesome and your clients are killing it, the money always follows.
Always. You can't, it's an inevitability that if you stay in touch with that vision and you deliver the quality and you put in the work, everyone's timeline will of course be different.
Yep.
Everyone's skill set will of course be different. But I've told people this, and I'm like, if you do XYZ, you will not fail.
Has anyone ever told you like the average timeline that it takes, like of the coaches that do hit like a 7-figure mark? Has anyone ever told you like the timeline for that?
I wouldn't know.
So, which I think is interesting because it's faster than I would think. So, I don't expect you to know anything about like my coaching containers, but I have a mastermind that's called Path to 4%, because only 4% of coaches ever reach 7 figures. And of the coaches that do reach 7 figures, on average, it takes 5 years. And I think that so many coaches are like expecting these crazy results so fast, and they get so discouraged because you've got like the Hermoses that are making so much and like these big names. And again, not saying that any of them scaled overnight, but when you're constantly listening to information from like billionaires, it can get discouraging sometimes. And I just want to remind you, like, sometimes stop listening to shit and just go fucking do stuff.
Right.
Like
Yep.
take the headphones out and just go take action. But
Yep.
anyway, is there anything else that, any last tips or anything you want to share to coaches that are out there aspiring to whether it be functional, contest prep, scaling their business?
You know, probably nothing that I haven't already said, but in a quick summarization, I suppose the key takeaways for me and for the people that I work with is staying in touch with that vision, whether that's you personally or the people that you choose to work with on your team. Making sure that you do not become complacent. You kind of alluded to that. It's like this sense of urgency that you need to maintain. I noticed that with people, it's not just people that get successful, people that continue to be successful. There's always a sense of urgency. It's like at any moment, I always say, I don't want anyone to take my shit. This is mine. This is mine. I did this. And I would prefer that no one, and if I do lose a client or something goes wrong, I did it. It's me. No one else did it. Like it was because of something that I need to improve on. So that extreme ownership aspect of it. Um, because ultimately I don't want to put my success in the hands of someone else. And that doesn't mean, that's not talking about mentoring. That's just talking about, I don't want to go to bed at night and think, well, that didn't work because I didn't do it. Like that's not something, you go to the show and you get second place, even though you put in all the work. That's a tough pill to swallow. But at the same time, a tougher pill to swallow is you didn't win because you didn't do it. You didn't put in the effort. So ultimately, stay in touch, continue to immerse yourself in the space, understand the space, listen, pay attention. I'm not talking about paying attention to what other people are doing. That can be helpful, but I'm talking about paying attention to what people need and what people are telling you. The problems that you face with your clients, whether it be retention or inquiries, the answer is always there. The answer is always there. If you pay attention, like, why are these failing? There's your answer. Why are you having client drop offs? There's your answer. It's always there. It's never complicated. Difficult, like simple and difficult are not, it's like it could be simple, but still difficult to execute. So understand it, execute it, be ready to work, you know?
Everything is always your fault at the end of the day, good or bad. right? Like that's how I like to look at it. It's like everything is a result of something that I did or didn't do. And everything is also a learning experience, good and
Yeah.
bad. You know, we even like collecting client feedback, right? Like so many coaches are not collecting data from their clients, even if it's like anonymous feedback too, you know, just making sure there's nothing you can learn from, right? Because we're all going to have a complaint here. We're all going to have somebody say something negative. And I think that we take so much personally, and there's so much emotion that we put into our business. And it's like, if you're going to make this work, like data, like focus on the data. But yeah, no, I agree. And you mentioned something about, I guess I'll kind of summarize it, but the risk of building a business, like I get it. I know it's risky. I get that. But for me, not doing it like was just not an option, because I would rather risk everything and lose and say I tried to do it versus always wondering what if, you know?
Yep.
And I think that
Absolutely.
like, that's just, yeah, that's going to help you sleep at night, you know? But anyway,
Yep.
Austin, I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. I've
Yeah.
got
Thanks for having me
links in
on.
the show notes. So anyway, if anyone's looking to get in touch with Austin, check out his content, mentorship, any of that, I will link that below.
Thank you so much.